One thing you might hear about levered ETFs is that they're bad because of decay. And that's the fact that they have to reset their leverage exposure daily. And this is primarily a safety mechanism or a downside protection mechanism so that they don't have too much of a drawdown in one levered position, right? So at the start of each day, the levered ETF takes out the intended exposure to the underlying asset, usually using futures, and then at the end of the day, it closes that out. So if you look at the fine print on any of these levered ETFs, or not fine print, but they explicitly state we intend to 3x the daily return of, whatever the underlying market is. So they're very clear about that, but that, over a prolonged period of time can ultimately result in decay, and that is where you don't quite get the intended exposure over the long period of time. Yes, you get the intended exposure daily, but that does not persist over a 1-year period. If you have a 3x ETF, you do not necessarily get exactly 3x. And commonly you hear about the decay because you get less than that exposure. But on the flip side of the coin, one thing that nobody really talks about is during strong bull markets, you can actually get more than the intended exposure, right? So rather than having decay, you have recay? I don't know, is that even a word? I'm sure that's not a word, but you get more exposure and you get higher return than you initially planned for with the actual ETF. So this past year has been a great year for the S&P 500. This is the last day of 2021 that I'm recording this, and we've had about a 28 or 29% total return in the S&P 500. Let's see how the levered ETFs have done. So I put them on Morningstar here, and we've got SSO, which is the 2x S&P 500 ETF, and then SPXL, which is a 3x S&P 500 ETF. Now, if we look at it here, we can see the S&P 500, and I use Vanguard's mutual fund, VFINX, for it, has a 28.87% return on $10,000. So these are total return figures that I'm looking at here. And if we do the math on it, 28.87 times, oops, not that, we're going to go 28.87 times 2 is 57.74%. Whereas the 2x ETF is up 61.12%. So it has more than doubled its actual return, or it's gotten more than double its return, right? I don't know if I'm saying that, but it's a 2x ETF. It has returned more than 2x. Same thing applies for 3x, except even a little bit more extreme, 28.87 times 3 right here is 86.61, whereas SPXL has gotten 99.75. So it is done, I don't want to say it's done incredibly well because that makes it seem like there's some kind of active management, but it has not been subject to decay. In fact, the resetting daily has actually helped it to where over this long period of time, or over the last year, it has returned more than its intended exposure. So now, of course, while I'm showing the good here, there is, of course, decay. So let's just show an example of decay. That would be like if we put EEM, which is the iShares Emerging Markets ETF on here, we can see it's down, 3.58%. If we put EDC, 3X Emerging Markets, it's going to be down probably more than 3 that. Yeah, so it's down almost 20%, basically about 5X this, right? Even though it's just 3X exposure. So decay can happen on leveraged ETFs, but what I want to point out here is during bull markets, you can also get the opposite of decay. I don't know what to call it, but you can get more than the intended exposure and you can get higher returns from that. So while levered ETFs do decay, there is a flip side of the coin that should also be considered. Now, I'm not saying just, jump in head first into levered ETFs. They're great. You can just go in here and print money. I mean, why did anyone need to work last year when we could just get 99.75% return on our money with SPXL? Right? I'm not saying that. I just want to present the opposite side of the coin. That is, levered ETFs can go up more than their intended exposure during bull markets.